That is how they pronounce it. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. In case you do come across that, you might be offended, but don't be, because that's what they call it. That's the WHA stamp. Okay, so does anybody know what so like the Americans and the Canadians, we got that rivalry going, right? So the Aussies and the Kiwis have something similar. So the Kiwis have a name for this place. Anybody? The West Island. That's a good day. You're playing in my joke. It's awesome. It's awesome. Okay, so I showed you how Sydney is the gateway for Australia. So Auckland is the gateway for New Zealand. Beautiful little city. Not as easy to walk around as Sydney, in my opinion. But the harbor, walked it well. It's actually a bit of a hike down to the water. But I always forget to look up this statistic too. There's a per capita in the city of people. A statistic as to how many people own sailboats. It's like 1 in 3 or something ridiculous. Like, so go down to the harbor. It's beautiful. Go to see the University of Auckland. It's beautiful. Have a look around. It's a great city. So here's one thing that I'm hoping that we can sort of work into the Jan itinerary is a trip north of Auckland. Okay. So who went to New Zealand that actually went up to the tip? Did you go? No. And many people do not. So they get into Auckland and they automatically head south because that's just what people do. And it's a bit of a shame because up north is beautiful. You'll get up to a place called the Bay of Islands, turquoise water. You take a catamaran right through this hole in the rock. You go up to the northerly tip of the North Island of New Zealand, the most northerly tip in the country, and two seas actually come together. So you see these two tides, the Tasman Sea and the Pacific Ocean, come together. There's a lighthouse there. It's called Cape Reinga. You travel along 90 Mile Beach to get there. It's just, again, a special place. And it's a shame when people get to Auckland and they automatically head south and they miss out on it. But again, time is of the essence. So south of Auckland, to my way of thinking, Rotorua is like the Canada's Wonderland of New Zealand in terms of tourism. It's not like a theme park, but everything is there. So has anybody been to Canmore? Bam? Yes, in certain pockets of that, there is a smell. What is it? Sulfur, and it smells like rotten eggs, right? Multiply it by 1,000 when you go to Rotorua. There is so much thermal, this place stinks, it really does stink, but when you're there for an hour, you don't even notice it after a while. There's so much thermal underground activity there. The hot pools and the geysers and whatnot that you get to go and see, the mud pools I should say. It's a big part of why you're in Rotorua. And you can go into some residential areas and see steam coming from people's backyards because they've tapped into that underground activity. And there are parks with like sort of public bathtubs, big ones that are, they've got this beautiful, nice warm water. But that's one of the reasons why you would go to Rotorua. There's also a place called the Agrodome. So you'll see a sheep shearing demonstration. The Maori people of New Zealand, you know what the Maori people, they're the indigenous people. So you guys you probably went to Rotorua, right? Did you go to a hangi dinner?
No.
So there's something called a hangi dinner, Hangi. It's where they cook the food traditionally underground. And the gentleman will, the lady, has anybody been to a luau in Hawaii?
Yeah.
You know, the ladies out there, I think they're called poi, those little mini pom-poms. So there's some similarities there. The Maori people look very Polynesian, like the Hawaiians. Has anybody seen the New Zealand All Black rugby team before they start a match? They do something. They do a dance. Anybody know what it's called? A haka. Exactly. Do you know how to do one? Yeah, you can do it. It's more about the tongue, isn't it? It's all about the tongue. Does anybody know what we're talking about? So they do this dance where it's a war dance, a war cry, and it's meant to intimidate the enemy, basically. So you can go to Rotorua and go to a hangi dinner and see these guys do a haka, and it's quite a spectacle, that's for sure. Okay, so it's the haka, it's the Maori cultural performance, the sheep shearing, and the underground activity. Okay, so Rotorua, there is a lot to do. There's usually a 2-night stop in Rotorua just to take it all in. Outside of Rotorua, there's also a day trip. A lot of people will do it on the way to Rotorua. They'll stop and see the Waitomo caves, the glowworms. You guys probably seen those on television. Basically, you get in a steel boat, you go into a cave, and it's pitch dark in there. And when you get into an open section of this cave, you look on the ceiling, and there are all these worms in their bums. glow, fluorescent green, and it's a sight to see, and it's definitely a tourist attraction that's not to be missed. So that's a little bit about the North Island. When you leave Rotorua, there's still a lot to see, but again, if you try to stick to that 2.5 week window, you know, if I mentioned all the